Hi guys, welcome back. This is Crystal with Emerson Aurora Design. I'm going to show you how I do this scrapbook paper and foil stripes tumbler. I'm starting off with a 25-ounce straight Hydrosport from Stainless Depot, and I'm going to use this beautiful scrapbook paper that I purchased at Hobby Lobby. I'm going to apply it just like the fabric method with Mod Podge. You've seen me do this before with a previous tumbler. I'll link it I'll leave a little link here at the top. So I have sanded down this tumbler really well and washed it before this step. And I'm just going to apply a thin layer of Mod Podge to apply that scrapbook paper. Go in with thin, even strokes. You don't want a huge amount of Mod Podge on this step. It'll cause that paper to get too wet and move around and possibly tear. So you just want to be careful. And I'm just rolling my tumbler and applying the Mod Podge as I go. And I'm smoothing the paper out so that I don't have any air bubbles. I didn't pre-measure the scrapbook paper. I'm just going to cut it when I get to the end. But you can pre-measure if you like. I'm just making sure that all the air bubbles are pressed out and that paper is nice and stuck to the tumbler. I'm going to trim the edge off of the bottom with my scissors. Actually, no, with my blade. I'm going to roll that tumbler away from me and hold my blade firmly in place to get a nice straight line. If it's not perfect, I'm okay with that because I'm going to go in later with my foils and cover that bottom. I'm just trimming that overhang, and you can see that the paper is tearing. That's because the Mod Podge dried before I had a chance to trim. So just scrape off that extra. It's not a big deal. I just don't want that extra paper underneath to create a bump in the paper, in the seam. Be really careful when you're working with these blade tools. You don't want to cut yourself. So I'm going to apply more Mod Podge and get the rest of that paper sealed down. There still has a bit of an overhang. I'm going to go in again with my blade tool and just go along that piece of paper and pull that off. It's nice and straight. Again, it'll tear because that Mod Podge had dried. So it's better to do this when the Mod Podge is still a little bit wet. So I'm applying Mod Podge to the seam really well to hold that paper down. I'm going to go in with about 3 to 4 thin layers of Mod Podge to really seal this tumbler well before epoxy. And I'm just trimming up the top edge with my blade again. I wasn't able to use my fabric cutting tool for this particular tumbler because this one has a tall lip on it and I wasn't able to get a straight line with that. So I'm using my blade and just going along. And I'm fine if it's a little bit crooked because I am going to cover that just like the bottom with my foils later. So like I said, I'm going to go in with about 3 to 4 layers of Mod Podge. You just apply thin layers of Mod Podge and let them dry completely before you begin your second and third layer. Make sure you get the bottom and the top really well to seal that paper completely in. I've been having a lot of fun making these scrapbook paper tumblers. There's so many pretty patterns, and scrapbook paper is so much cheaper than vinyl. So here we are after those layers have dried, and I'm going to go in and put a layer of epoxy on. I'm going to mix in this magic dust. It's an ultra fine holographic white glitter from Glitter Craze. I'm going to mix that right into my epoxy, just a little tiny bit, just to give it a little bit of a sparkle. I'm just applying a thin amount of epoxy to really seal in that scrapbook paper. And you can see as I apply that, the epoxy, how much brighter the colors on that on the scrapbook paper become. Just gives it a really pretty richness, and it just, I don't know, it's really pretty. The scrapbook paper reminds me of flowers in the moonlight because that pretty blue. So I'm going to let this cure for 24 hours. And here we are the next day. Nice smooth layer of epoxy. And I'm going to show you how I do my stripes. So I have two different sizes of masking tape, painter's tape. The dark blue is the about 1.5 inches width. I'm going to apply that all around that tumbler, leaving an edge of the scrapbook paper. Wherever I'm applying this blue painter's tape is where the scrapbook paper is going to show through. So my stripes will be on either side. And I'm just going to create a space with my thinner masking tape. And again, I'm going to apply that blue painter's tape. And I'm just using this masking tape as a guide for my stripes. The birds are loud today, guys. So I'm going to leave that bottom edge exposed because I'm going to cover that bottom and that edge where the stainless still shows. So those will be my stripes. Now we're going to apply some tacket. I'm just going to apply my tacket directly from the bottle. You can water this down if you like, if that works better for you. But I find that I don't really need to do that. I applied a little bit too much. You want to just add a thin coat. I'm just going to use my leftover that I have on the one stripe to go ahead and do the second stripe there. It's okay if you go a little bit over onto the blue painter's tape. The foil will stick to it, but when you peel it up, it will make a fine line. I'm just going to apply that tacket to all of the exposed areas. And I'm going to let this dry. and it'll remain tacky so that we can apply our foils. I purchased these foils through Amazon. I'll leave a link in the description below. I'm just wiping off some of this excess tacket that got on that blue tape. So now it's nice and dry and tacky. I'm going to use a pretty purple and royal blue and silver foils. And these are foil sheets, colored foil sheets that I purchased in a big pack on Amazon. Like I said, I'll leave that link in the description below if you would like to see and purchase it for yourself. So I'm just gently tapping that onto the tacket. The tacket will grab hold really nicely of that foil and just create a really pretty metallic shimmer. I'm going to do 2 stripes of the purple, 2 stripes on the bottom, 2 stripes of the blue on the top, and then silver in the center. This foil is very messy. It will, once it kind of falls into little pieces, it is lighter than air. I'm telling you, this stuff is floating everywhere. So when you're using this, be careful and wear a dust particle mask so you don't breathe any of that foil in. It ends up being even lighter than glitter, and it was just kind of floating all over in the air. I have a love-hate relationship with these foils. I think they're absolutely beautiful to use. They add such a pretty shine, but it gets everywhere. And I mean everywhere. I had it all over my fingers, all over my clothes, all over my workspace. Oh my goodness. One word of advice: do not do this foiling on your tumbler anywhere near any other tumblers that may have wet glue or epoxy, because you will have foils on your other tumblers, so be careful. So now I'm just applying that silver to the center stripe. I hope you all had a wonderful 4th of July. I know we did. We had a good time. We went to Nashville, and they have a beautiful firework display, the biggest firework display I've ever seen. I hope you all had a wonderful 4th of July weekend. I would have had this video up yesterday, but we were in Nashville out of town, so you get to see it today. You can see I'm just kind of burnishing that foil down with my fingers, trying to remove the excess little pieces, and you can overlap them. They'll just brush away when you brush them with your finger or a paintbrush. But like I said, using a paintbrush does kind of create those little flakes to float in the air, so be careful. Wear a mask. I'm trying the best I can to not make a big mess. I did not succeed in that. So once I have these all burnished down, I'm going to go ahead and immediately pull up the tape so that I have a nice straight edge. Now I had, full disclosure, I did take that tumbler after I applied the foils and hold it over my trash can and rub off all the excess little pieces. You can see here I'm doing my best to take that tape off. It's hard to do that with gloves. And I think the colors I chose work really well for the scrapbook paper. It reminds me of, like I said, flowers in the moonlight, so that's why I wanted to use the blue and the silver. And it also has a little bit of purple vibe to it, so that's why I chose those colors. It doesn't have to be perfect. I didn't care if it wasn't perfect. It kind of gives it a little bit of a rustic effect if the edges are a little bit rough, and it doesn't really matter. I'm going to go in and put some vinyl pinstripes over the edges here in a little bit. You'll see. So I'm just brushing off those edges, making sure that no stray pieces are getting anywhere. It looks pretty. So I'm going to show you how to, some of the little pieces of foil actually stuck to that center part where the scrapbook paper is. So I'm just taking my little sanding block and gently sanding those stuck pieces off. Now I'm only sanding the parts where the scrapbook paper is under the resin. I'm not sanding where the foil is because that would take it off. I know it's hard to see, but I am holding my sanding block at a pretty steep angle and just using the edge of it to take off those little stray pieces that stuck to that part of the tumbler. It works like an eraser, basically. And I just wanted to show you that because that, like I said, that foil, it gets a little wild and it sticks to everything. Even the spots you don't want it to stick. The foil is now burnished down really well though. So this is after the next layer of epoxy. We really shined up that foil and the scrapbook paper. And I'm going to apply my pinstripes. I'm using a chrome metallic silver as the larger stripe that would be underneath. And then where the purple stripes are, I'm using a thin purple, just a basic purple vinyl. And the blue vinyl will go where the blue stripes are. I'll link some of my favorite vinyls in the description box below that I purchased from Amazon. I tend to just kind of try out different brands and different companies with my vinyl. I don't really have one particular brand that I absolutely have to have. I don't really care for Cricut vinyl, but I do have some Cricut vinyl that I use on occasion. It's just hard to weed. I don't really care for it. So I'm just rolling my tumbler straight on the table and allowing those stripes to fall naturally in a straight line, and then trimming the excess off with my X-Acto knife. Like I said, be really careful when you're doing this. I'm going to peel off that underside and scrape off the other piece of vinyl that was underneath that I had cut, so that this will lay flat, if that makes sense. And I'm just going to smooth it down and make sure it's down really well. So I'm going to apply that to every stripe, the silver to every stripe. And it's just essentially going to cover up any edges that may not be perfect. It's good camouflage. For some reason, I'm really loving striped tumblers lately. If you haven't noticed, my last few tutorials have had some striped tumblers. I just like the symmetry, and they're just, I don't know, pleasing to my eye. So it's starting to take shape here. It's looking really pretty. Now you could have put the stripes down before the layer of epoxy, but then you stand the chance of possibly pulling up your foil. So it is better to have that layer of protection of the cured epoxy before doing stripes. Plus it gives it a 3D effect that the vinyl looks like it's kind of sitting on top, kind of floating on top of everything. So with these thinner stripes, I'm just holding them just like I did with the silver ones and just rolling the tumbler. Make sure I get a straight line. Really, I'm just eyeballing it. I am not a measurer per se. I just kind of go with the flow and eyeball things most of the time. So the purple stripes are going on the purple all the way to the bottom of that silver, and then I'm applying the blue to the top of the silver and on the blue foil stripes, or around the foil stripe. You understand. You have to forgive me. It's been a holiday weekend and we were busy, so I'm a little tired doing this voiceover. Hopefully I'm making sense doing it. It's starting to really look pretty. Sometimes when I create my designs, I don't always know how it's going to look in the end. I have a general idea, but then as my creation takes shape, I'm pleasantly surprised with how beautiful it looks. And then there's the other times that I don't really like what I make, so this is not one of them. I love this tumbler. These Hydro Sports are my favorite tumblers. I don't know, I love water bottles, and these ones are nice because they're like the tall, skinny 30-ounce bottles, or cups basically. So you want to press down those vinyl stripes really firmly, make sure that they're really adhered, and then I'm going to go in with some clear gloss lacquer. You can use any brand you like, just as long as it's a clear gloss. And I'm just really spraying down those stripes because metallic vinyl has a tendency to peel up under epoxy. So I'm just giving it a light coat and let that dry completely. And then I will go in and add a layer of epoxy, let that cure, sand my tumbler down, and then one more layer of epoxy. And here she is. Isn't she beautiful? Thank you so much for taking the time to watch my video. I hope you take inspiration from this and try it yourself. Hit that subscribe button if you want to see more videos. Give me a thumbs up and drop a comment or a question below and I'll get back with you. Thank you so much again. Happy crafting, everybody.